Welcome to a pretty wild explainer today. We're exploring a deeply fascinating concept, the idea that your past doesn't actually dictate your present or your future. So, if you've ever felt completely stuck by your personal history, get ready, because we are about to completely flip the script on how we understand human behavior. Okay, let's just rip the Band-Aid off right away. What if your past trauma literally doesn't exist? I know, we're starting with a massive, highly controversial disruption to how we typically think about emotional pain and our personal histories. It sounds shocking, maybe even impossible, right? But stick with me for a few minutes as we unpack exactly where this idea comes from. To really wrap our heads around this radical idea, we're diving into the Adlerian psychological concepts laid out in the massive hit book, The Courage to be Disliked, by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga. Now, this book has become an absolute global phenomenon by taking the philosophy of Alfred Adler, who was a contemporary of Freud and Jung, by the way, and presenting it in a really accessible dialogue. Let's see how it challenges basically everything we think we know. All right, let's dive right into this core philosophical clash. Freudian etiology, which is the widely accepted idea we're all pretty used to, tells us that our past causes our present. If you were hurt in the past, you suffer today. But Adlerian Teleology argues something completely different. It says our present goals drive our behavior. Adler basically says we aren't being pushed from behind by our past. Instead, we're being pulled forward by the goals we're setting for ourselves right now. So, what the heck is teleology anyway? Put simply, it's the study of the purpose of a given phenomenon, rather than its cause. It means acting to achieve a present goal. Teleology states that we don't act because of past traumas, but because we are actively trying to achieve a specific goal right here, right now, whether we consciously realize we're doing it or not. Let's make this real with a practical example straight from the book. Imagine a shut-in friend. This is someone who suffers extreme anxiety, stomach cramps, and physical palpitations at the mere thought of leaving his room. Now, etiology would look at this and say some deep past trauma caused this intense fear. But let's look at it through the lens of teleology. Here is where the paradigm just flips upside down. Adlerian psychology suggests this person isn't actually anxious because of past trauma. Rather, he manufactures the anxiety as a tool. He literally creates the anxiety to achieve his current goal of staying safely inside, avoiding judgment, and maybe even gaining the worried attention of his parents. The goal comes first, and then the emotion follows. Okay, let's bring this a little closer to home with a highly relatable scenario. Did you lose control, or did you actually choose anger? The book describes this great situation where a waiter accidentally spills coffee on a customer's brand new jacket. Naturally, the customer flies into a rage and just starts shouting at the top of his lungs. We'd usually say the spill caused the anger, right? But did it? Adlerian psychology argues the customer didn't just lose control. Let's actually break it down. First, he had a clear goal, making the waiter submit and apologize immediately. Second, he fabricated the emotion of anger as a really quick tool to intimidate. And finally, he shouted to achieve that goal. He basically used anger to force submission without the hassle of a calm, drawn-out explanation. And this brilliantly illustrates our next point. As Alfred Adler himself profoundly stated, we do not suffer from the shock of our experiences. We make out of them whatever suits our purposes. The big, profound takeaway here is that we aren't determined by our experiences. We are entirely determined by the meaning we actively choose to give them. Basically, you hold the pen to your own story. Now, I know what you might be asking yourself right about now. What about the feeling of inferiority? If we choose our emotions and our reactions, how do we explain that crushing feeling of not being good enough that so many of us share? Is that manufactured too? Well, let's unpack that. We actually need to draw a really sharp line here between two very different concepts. Healthy inferiority is a totally universal feeling of wanting to improve. It acts as a launchpad for growth. Think of the chef who wants to perfect a recipe. But in inferiority complex, that is when you use your perceived flaws as a toxic excuse to just throw your hands up and give up. So the absolutely crucial point is understanding this exact formula. A is the situation, so B cannot be done. An inferiority complex uses perceived flaws as what Adler calls a life lie to avoid trying. It operates on the entirely false logic that because of X, I cannot achieve Y. It's really just a convenient shield against the very real fear of failure or rejection. Think about how often we hear or, let's be honest, even use these common excuses ourselves. I'm not well educated, so I can't succeed. I'm not good looking, so I can't get married. My parents divorced, so I can't find happiness. People use this complex to manufacture these apparent cause and effect relationships. They pretend their background is this immovable barrier to success, when really, they're just lacking the courage to take a step forward. And this realization brings us to what might be Adler's most sweeping, wild claim. Every single problem we have is fundamentally an interpersonal relationship problem. Just think about it for a second. If you lived completely alone in the universe, the very concept of inferiority wouldn't even exist. We only feel these things because we are constantly comparing ourselves to others. Which leads us directly into a massive trap, the desire for recognition. From a super young age, we're taught through reward and punishment to seek praise and fear being disliked. But this traps us in an incredibly exhausting cycle of living simply to satisfy other people's expectations. We end up prioritizing what others think way over what we actually want to do with our lives. So, how on earth do we break free from this people-pleasing cycle? The ultimate solution is a highly practical tool known as the separation of tasks. Whenever you face interpersonal stress, the very first thing you need to ask yourself is this one simple question. Whose task is this? Think of this concept as your new ultimate boundary guide. You have to draw a strict, firm line between my task, which is what I can control and choose, like my own beliefs, actions, and work, and other people's tasks, which are their emotions, their reactions, and their opinions. You literally cannot control what someone else thinks with you, so you have to stop trying to manage it. Let's apply this by actively discarding other people's tasks. Stop intervening in what others have to solve, and stop letting others intervene in your choices. For example, if your boss is unreasonably angry and yells at you, that is his task to manage. It's not your task to fix his mood by yielding or begging for his approval. You just focus on doing your own work with integrity. And guys, here is perhaps the most liberating quote of this entire explainer. Freedom is being disliked by other people. Wow. True freedom requires the courage to follow your own path, even if it means someone might dislike you. Because if they dislike you, that is their task to deal with, not yours. It's simply the cost of living authentically. By dropping the excuses, separating your tasks, and truly letting go of the past, you finally find the courage to just exist and thrive in the present. You shine a massive spotlight on the here and now. Your life isn't a determined storyline written by your past. It's a series of moments, and it is entirely up to you how you're going to dance in this current moment. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought today. Ask yourself, if the chains of your past are really just an illusion you created, what hidden goal are your current excuses trying to serve? What are you protecting yourself from right now? Because once you recognize the goal, you finally have the power to change it. Thank you so much for exploring this with me.